What do a military purge and soybean exports have to do with one another? We'll take a look at that today in our update from the trading floor on this Thursday, January 29th. Hi, my name is Arlan Suderman, Chief Commodities Economist at StoneX, coming to you today to take a look again across the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, at China and what's happening over there. As we saw some big developments in recent days there that really has people astir in China, not talking publicly about it, but certainly privately. It's a big, shocking development that we've seen. Another purge in the military leadership, and this time hitting very close to home for President Jinping, as we saw a couple more big military leaders accused of corruption and removed from their positions. The developments over the weekend are part of an ongoing purging with top leaders being accused of corruption, which is China's way of removing them from office. And let's give a little bit of a background. The military in China is controlled by what's called the Central Military Commission, the CMC. And at one point here recently, there were six generals serving on on the CMC, in addition to some top Communist Party leadership. But now there's only one general left. And the last two that were removed were highly significant, particularly since one of them was particularly close to President Xi Jinping. Um, we felt like back in October, when there were rumors of problems in China and they were heading into the fourth plenum meeting, the 15th fourth plenum meeting. That's the 5 year strategy meeting of the Communist Party of China, a time when leaders are sometimes removed from position at various levels, that we felt like President Xi was secure in his position, although he may have a weak some cracks in his power base that he would be assessing, but we felt like he's secure in his position because one of his longtime, lifelong, in fact, family friends was at a high position on the CMC in the military as a general. And so we felt like that assured him the support of the military, and so he would be secure in his position. I said at the time that this 4 day meeting in about the third week of October would be a measuring stick for Xi to determine or indicate what his support base was like at home. And if he felt like his support base at home was strong, that we wouldn't even see him meet with President Trump, perhaps in South Korea the following week. President Trump, meanwhile, was talking about how he was going to meet and have a trade deal, and China would buy soybeans. But I also warned that if he sensed that there was cracks in the foundation of that support base, that he would be quick to want to ink a deal with the United States to calm the international waters so that he could focus on his problems at home. Now, President Trump has his problems at home as well, as he's losing the independent voter, according to surveys shown, and he can't afford to lose the independent voter ahead of the midterm elections in November. And if he loses Congress in those midterm elections, his agenda gets significantly curtailed. So both leaders had reason to come together to calm the international waters with that handshake trade deal that they reached. Now, let's bring it forward then. China was quick to want a deal, indicating there were problems. There were cracks in that foundation of support for President Xi, and he has continued with the purging. And in fact, over the weekend, he removed yet another CMC vice chair and Politburo member who was that close friend, that close family friend of his. And that's what's been most shocking of China, that nobody is now safe. Now, you can read this as, with just one general left on the CMC, that President Xi has unprecedented power now over the military. Or you can read it that his insecurities are growing and he's really worried about whether he is has defectors around him, and that becomes something, making it afraid to sleep at night type of an issue. My bias is that there are significant cracks in the foundation, and the more that he tries to tighten the noose, so to speak, the more those cracks are going to unfold and become harder to control. That doesn't mean that he's about to be removed from office or anything like that. It does mean that those risks are certainly there. What it does mean, and this is where it ties into soybeans, is you remember when that trade deal was announced, I said there were two things that could unravel this. We have seen China buy the 12 million metric tons of soybeans as promised. We've only started to see those shipments, so they are starting in the process now of shipping those soybeans. What could make everything fall apart were two issues, as I've indicated, two flashpoints, and that was rare earth minerals issue, and the other is Taiwan. The rare earth minerals issue, both President Trump and President Xi are trying to find a way to get along. It is still there. It is still a potential flashpoint, but it is calmed down for the time being, and we anticipate that it will continue to be calm in the months ahead. The Taiwan issue could always kind of blow up in our face, so to speak. But the fact that there is so many key leaders now missing from the military, and this purging is still moving forward. We anticipate more people are going to be removed from their positions. That leaves the military in a little bit of a disarray. So we do not expect to see China make a move on Taiwan unless it feels pushed into it. And then it might not be fully prepared as much as like to actually succeed in that. So we think this is going to keep the waters calm. We see this as positive for soybean shipments and perhaps other commodities moving to China. We know that U.S. and Chinese negotiators met on the sideline of the conference at Davos at the World Economic Forum, and that they plan on working on more trade deal language ahead of when President Trump and President Xi meet face to face once again later this year. So that is in the works. Both of them really need these international waters calm. So we're feeling better as a result that the soybeans will be shipped. Now, I do not expect another 25 million metric tons to go to China in the next marketing year. With the crop that is essentially made now in Brazil, we can assume that Brazil soybeans will be cheaper than US soybeans throughout calendar year 2026, and that as a result, crushers will have no interest in buying US soybeans or very little interest at that. Yes, US soybeans have a higher quality to them, according to many in the industry, but Chinese crushers are also value crushers, and they go for the best value, and they see that as Brazilian soybeans, and we expect that to continue. We could see weather problems cut the size of the crop in Argentina, but that tends to play out more in the product market. So if the 25 million metric tons were to be purchased, it would likely have to be primarily by the state grain buyer to go into the reserve. They simply do not have storage for that large a scale of soybeans. Now, they could offer them auction at a big discount. That would indicate a significant commitment of China trying to keep the waters calm, so to speak. But I fully expect this to be part of the renegotiation process. Maybe they do another 12 million metric tons instead of 25 million metric tons. That does help bridge the gap to getting our domestic biofuel program better established here in the United States. Could still be seen as a positive. 25 million metric tons, if we have a strong biofuel program, would be considered very positive. I simply don't see it. That doesn't mean I don't see some opportunities for a tight balance sheet. I'm just trying to be realistic here. As we go forward, I wanted to briefly mention one other thing. We've talked previously about the rare earth minerals issue, how China has, over the last 30 years, been carrying out a strategy of gaining control of the world's supply of rare earth minerals to where they control 90%. Some analysts say as much as 97%. I'm going to go with 90% for now, but essentially a monopoly of the supply of processed rare earth minerals. We saw that Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada, traveled to China to work out a trade deal that has significantly angered President Trump. One of the reasons is President Trump has been trying to contain China with the various trade deals he writes with different countries. And Mark Carney, with this deal, has seemed to have swung the door wide open for China to have access to Canada. But one of the critical things in there, not getting much press, was the allowance of China to buy a mining company in Canada, a Canadian-owned mining company that also owns several mining companies in Africa. So China gains these controls listed as gold mining companies, but when you mine gold, you also mine other minerals, including critical rare earth minerals, allowing China to have greater control over a larger segment of the industry, both of gold and of rare earth minerals in this. Certainly a factor that probably won't be named specifically by Trump, but one of the other factors that's very upsetting to him, and why President Trump has threatened another 100% tariff on Canada if, in fact, it goes through with the trade deal. And so that's a real concern considering the ag trade that we do, the energy trade that we do with Canada, specifically the amount of heavy crude oil that we bring down into refineries in the Midwest from Canada, which have previously been waived from those tariffs by President Trump trying to hold down energy costs and inflation. So that could happen again. Canada is also one is our biggest buyer of ethanol from the United States. Now, whether it would retaliate with tariffs against that ethanol coming into Canada or not, we still do not know. There's quite a bit of the grain that moves back and forth between the United States and Canada as well. So we'll be staying on top of that and keep you informed with these updates from the trading floor. If you want to continue to receive them, be sure to like and subscribe get to receive notice of these updates. Once again, I'll be back with you next week with more updates from the trading floor.